Hey guys, Jed Bratt here, the Real Estate Jedi of Big Block Realty. In this video, we're going to be talking about 5 reasons why, if you're buying your first property, you really might want to consider a 2 to 4 unit. And we're going to go over these points right now. All right, guys, first, it's pretty much house hacking, okay? This is going to be buying a 2 to 4 unit or even buying a single family property with an accessory dwelling unit is going to be one of the quickest and best ways for you to be able to house hack. Essentially, what you're able to do is you're able to use the same loan to buy this property, but all you have to do is live in one of the units and your tenant is going to be paying, if not, a good chunk of it, they're going to be contributing towards your mortgage payment. In other words, somebody else is helping you pay your mortgage. In fact, if you were to get, for example, a 2, a 3, or a 4 unit, think about it this way. Imagine if you had a 4 unit and you have tenants in 3 of those units, and they're all paying you market rent. Now, granted, you of course bought the property for substantially more than you're gonna buy a single family house for, but what about when you calculate in that you're receiving rent from 3 different tenants while you're living in the 4th unit? Many times, you might not be able to get the entire thing covered, but many times you're gonna be able to get a pretty significant chunk of your mortgage covered. And in some cases, in some markets, many times you're actually able to get all of your mortgage covered, if not for maybe even a little bit more. That is one of the most powerful things about buying a 2 to 4 unit that you're not gonna get with a regular single family house or condo. Number 2, you're getting your foot in the investment door right off the bat. So instead of buying a single family house or a condo where the only time you're really going to appreciate anything, any return on investment is when you sell or you leave the property and rent it out, you actually get to start experiencing the benefits of being a real estate investor before doing anything else from day one. So from day one, you get to put a tenant in your vacant unit or units if you have more than 2 units, and you are already a real estate investor. You are already collecting cash flow. You are already receiving that residual income. Now, of course, it's gonna take a little bit more work, but what you're really doing is you're building your resume. So listen to this. When you think about it this way, if you're gonna go and buy a property, let's say a 4-unit property in a few years, let's say your goal originally was just to buy a single family house. You wanna live in your single family house for your nice family first, and then down the road, you wanna start investing. Here's why you might not want to do this. Maybe you want to flip this around and go the other way. Think about it this way. When you're applying for a mortgage, especially a 2 or 3 or 4 unit property, if you already have a single family house, first and foremost, unless you're going to be living in that unit, you're not going to be able to get the same low down payment programs that you're going to normally get. So if you're buying, let's just say a $750,000 duplex or threeplex, you're probably going to have to put anywhere on the low end 10% down. And that's probably not even going to happen if you're not owner occupying the place, more likely 20 to 25% down. Now here's the other thing. If the max you were able to qualify for was $500,000, let's say for a single family house, if you were going to use that as a rental, but you wanted to qualify for more for a 2 unit or 3 unit or 4 unit, the bank actually lets you use projected rents from the units in order to qualify to buy. But this is the key thing here. They only do that if you have some management history of managing properties. So, in other words, if you were to go buy a single family house as your first property, that's your primary residence, you're not moving, you just want to have that and then you want to buy other units. Okay, so you go out and you finally find a 3 or 4 unit that you want to buy and you apply for the loan and you realize that, hey, if you could just use the income that these units are going to generate to qualify for that loan, then you could actually qualify for that. Problem is, the lender's going to look at you and they're going to say, okay, great. Can you show me history on your tax returns that you've managed and owned property before? And if you can't provide that, then they're not going to look at you as a professional investor. They're not going to look at you with the same expectations that they would somebody who simply had a duplex and was renting 1 unit out for a few years, showing that on their tax returns. So essentially, if you can just get your foot in the door, instead of buying a single family house as your first property, if you know you want to buy investment units later on, if you just get your foot in the door and buy a duplex even, and you rent that 1 unit out, as soon as you start claiming that rent money on your tax returns, Guys, that's when all of a sudden, when you go to buy more units, lenders will allow you to use income projected that you haven't even realized yet. So if you want to use projected income and you have management history, get this. So let's just say you want to go buy a 4-unit in a few years. As long as you've been claiming that income from your other unit on your duplex or anything else for at least a year or 2, the lender is going to allow you to use the projected income from the other units that you're going to be buying. So let's just say you want to go buy a 4-plex. And let's just say the units bring in $2,000 a month each. Okay, so that's $8,000 a month, right? Now, the lender is going to allow you to use up to 75% of that projected income, which is crazy. So they're gonna allow you to use up to $6,000 additional monthly income that you haven't even made yet, and you're not even gonna start to make until you close and buy that property, but you can use that to qualify for that purchase. How crazy is that? You're essentially putting the cart before the horse and then still being successful at everything you're doing. It's amazing, it's really amazing. Number 3, 2 to 4 units by their nature are income producing properties, okay? These properties were built to produce income. So, by nature, they tend to have more security in down markets as well as up markets. Just for example, in 2009, I bought my first multi-unit in San Diego County. Of course, we all know that 2009 was a horrible market for San Diego County real estate, actually national real estate. But I actually was able to buy this multi-unit, but I raised the rents from the highs in 2006, if you can believe that. So imagine all these people that were in this crisis and they couldn't buy a property because they, for whatever reason, weren't approved or they were foreclosed on or whatever, unfortunately. But there was a lot of new tenants on the market. And what do you think that did to rents? In some areas, rents of course were going down as well, but also in some areas, rents were actually receiving upward pressure because of this newfound demand for tenant housing. And the crazy thing about this too is, again, if, worst case scenario, if the market cools down and takes a dip, no matter where you are, and you have a multi-unit, you bought for value, like we teach you in this course, and you're in a good area with good demand, you're gonna have so much more stability in that downturn, owning a 2 to 4 unit property. If for no other reason than you have an income producing property, even if you're living in the property, even if it's just a duplex, you're at least receiving the rents from that one other unit. If you have 3 or 4 units, even if you have to make an eviction or a tenant doesn't pay on time, you have that much more risk spread out. Whereas even if you had a single family house and maybe it covered its own mortgage payment in rents, if you were to rent just that property out, all you need is one vacancy, and then if the market's cool and it's hard to find other tenants at the time, you still have only one unit to produce that income. So if you have one vacant unit, you have 100% vacancy. So huge benefit of owning a 2 to 4 unit, a lot more safety in downturns, something you will really appreciate whenever the market shifts. Number 4, guys, you're gonna maximize your owner-occupied loan leverage. And let me explain. So when you're buying your first property, chances are you're probably going to be using a owner-occupied loan, and many times you might be using a loan like an FHA loan or even a VA loan if you're eligible for it, with as little as 3.5% down or 0% down sometimes for VA, or even sometimes a 5% or other sort of conventional loan made for owner-occupied purchases. Now the benefit of this is a 2 to 4 unit is looked at in the eyes of the lender essentially the same as a single family house. Now, there's a few caveats, but look at it this way. If you are buying a duplex and you're using an owner-occupied loan, the lender only requires that you occupy one of those units. So if you're gonna buy an investment property, let's just say it's a $500,000 single family house or $500,000 duplex, and you wanna buy that and you're not gonna live in it, you're just gonna rent it out completely, you're gonna at least have to put down 20% to buy that property. So you're gonna have to at least plop down 100 G's just to go buy a rental property like a duplex or single family house if you're not living in it. But if you're the owner-occupied buyer and you're living in just one of the units, you get the same benefits. So if you're buying it with a FHA loan, get this, actually, it goes up from 2 units to 3 units to 4 units. Your loan limit that you can use 3.5% down for with FHA actually goes up. With VA, it stays the same, but usually it's still a pretty generous allotment. So you can be buying a property, living in only one of the units, and getting multiple units under the same advantages of having an owner-occupied loan. So you're essentially accumulating units while you're just using the same owner-occupied loan and only occupying one of those units. How crazy is that? And then, as long as you stay in the property the minimum time frame, which is typically 12 months, you can still move out of that property that you had that owner-occupied loan on, rent all the units out, and then you own an asset, a multifamily asset that you didn't put $200,000, $100,000, 25% down on. You own a property that you were able to get with minimal down payment, but now is an asset pumping away, generating money for you, working for you. That's house hacking. That's intelligent investing. Number 5 consideration, guys. You want to seriously consider buying a 2 to 4 unit first and then going out and buying a dream home versus the other way around. Plain and simple, the spread between the income that a 2 to 4 unit property is going to produce and the underlying mortgage is typically going to be a lot more of a spread than you're going to experience if you have a single family house income from a potential tenant and the mortgage that you're going to have on a single family house. Now, that's not always going to be the case, but it's important to keep in mind because if you're going to be applying for additional loans for like a 2 to 4 unit, typically speaking, the lender's going to want to see strong financials. And if you have a 2 to 4 unit that you just vacated and you're renting all of the units out now and you're using some of that income to qualify for the purchase of your single family or dream house, then that's actually going to help you in purchasing your other house. See, you're buying the assets first and then you're buying the liabilities versus the other way around. You're technically buying a liability. Even though real estate, even a single family house might appreciate, it might be a huge asset for you, technically speaking, you're buying something that's going to be much less income generating, and you're going to have that burden on your debt to income ratio before you even go to buy a multifamily property. And remember, guys, if you don't have any management history, then it's going to be much more difficult, if not impossible, to be able to use that projected income from the units in order to purchase them. Whereas if you just had a single duplex property or a 3 unit and you rented some of the units out just for a few years and you had that on your taxes, you're going to be able to use that income to qualify for other things, even to qualify for other 2 to 4 units. A big consideration to keep in mind.